Hi, I'm Mark Brower, Director of the Recovery Journey and the SexualSanity.com recovery blog. Today's question is, what do you do if you're struggling to stay sober? What do you do if you're chronically relapsing? Let's say you're getting involved in a program or you've been involved in some kind of group, some kind of program for recovery, and you go periods of time where you're doing okay, maybe have a certain amount of sobriety, and then every few weeks or whatever you'll fall back into the behaviors. What I want to suggest is there are 3 questions that we should ask if we're struggling with relapse. And there might be other things. This is not the exhaustive list. This might not be fitting every single situation, but these are 3 important questions to ask, because as I observe it, a lot of guys will struggle because of one of these three issues. First one is, if you're struggling with relapsing, ask the question, is there something going on neurochemically? Is there some neurochemical imbalance? Something going on that is creating this tremendous craving? The technical term for this, or the therapist term, would be co-occurring disorders or dual diagnosis. That if someone has an addiction, a lot of times there's some other kind of challenge that they're facing, something going on neurochemically that is causing them to feel this inordinate amount of craving, and they turn to some substance or some addictive behavior as a way of restoring balance to that neurochemistry. So if someone is depressed, they'll do something that boosts the adrenaline. If they're feeling kind of anxious, they'll do something, or they'll find some sort of drug to bring calming. So I think the 3 ones to be aware of would be depression, anxiety, and ADHD. You know, if a person is feeling depressed, and one of the ways that you've coped with that is through some kind of addictive behavior as a way of bringing a sense of momentary euphoria, adrenaline, a way of bringing sort of more life or more energy into your system, then if you're not finding a way of dealing with that neurochemical imbalance, you're going to struggle. Same thing with anxiety. If we're too amped up and we have anxiety and fear, we'll be turning to things to calm us. If we have ADHD, undiagnosed ADHD, we're going to be always feeling restless and empty and looking for something to relieve that boredom. And the point is, if you have something like that that's not being addressed on a neurochemical level, it's going to be really hard to stay sober. So a lot of people will struggle at this point because they don't want to deal with whatever stigma they might have in their minds about going to see a psychiatrist, doing something that might involve medication. And by the way, treating these disorders may not necessarily involve medication. There's a variety of things we can do, but the experience of recovery from sexual addiction or any kind of addiction involves not just the behavior kind of focuses that we have in the programs that I run, not just the therapy that a counselor would work with a person on, but it also involves dealing with the neurochemical realities so that we're not fighting against them. So that would be the first question. Second question to ask, if you're struggling with ongoing sobriety, ongoing relapse patterns, is there troubles or trauma from the past that you haven't dealt with? Is there undiagnosed or undealt with early life trauma? Now, the workshops that I teach at with Mark Laser at Faithful and True Ministries, this is the main focus of that workshop, is to help people get a sense of how the roots of their addiction have gotten formed, and sort of help people get clear on where this addiction goes back to and what we need to do about it. It sort of focuses on getting at the roots of that. And sometimes in the process of going through the exercises we go through and group process, there's a lot of healing that takes place. And for some people in that workshop, we will say, you need to do more work on this. And some people need to do a lot of work, ongoing work, to deal with a lot of trauma, overt trauma, abuse kind of stuff. And it might simply be deprivation, things that should have happened to them that didn't happen, things that they didn't get as they were growing up that they needed. And if we don't deal with those things, we're going to continually struggle with relapsing. So that may be something, if you're doing doing the program work, if you're going to groups and doing the stuff that other people are doing, but you're struggling to stay sober, maybe part of the reason is there's undiagnosed or there's undealt with early life trauma. Then finally, the third question to ask is probably the one that would come to mind first for people, but the other ones I think are important to address first. And this one is the kind of the basic one is, am I working the program the way I need to work it? Am I doing the things that I need to do for recovery? And especially as the recovery goes on and weeks and months pass by, a lot of times we will start to slip back into old behaviors, or we'll start to drop out of doing things that we were doing early on. We'll maybe start skipping meetings. We'll maybe start letting ourselves watch things on television or go to movies or look at things on the internet that are kind of on the edge that open the door to our addiction. Early on, we were more careful about those kind of boundaries, and over time we sort of relax them, and we make ourselves more and more susceptible, more and more vulnerable to the power of that addiction. And so because we're relaxing those boundaries, we start drifting. We start drifting when we're drifting away from other people. We get into more isolation. We're not getting the support we need to get. So if we're not doing the things we need to do for recovery and we're not recovering, it's obvious what we need to do. We need to get back into the fundamentals of the program. And the fundamentals, really, there are three things. One is doing a little something every day to remind us of our recovery, doing some recovery reading, some meditation, some kind of recovery task, just something that connects me with, that reminds me of my commitment to emotional and spiritual health, my commitment to sexual purity, my commitment to recovery. Then the second thing we need to do as far as, just our ongoing recovery work is be involved in some kind of group, some kind of, support structure. It can involve an accountability person or, support person, but it's much better if it's a group of people and a group that we're going to that sort of leads us in some kind of recovery process. Maybe that would also involve having a sponsor. Am I continuing to stay involved in that, or am I drifting? Am I skipping meetings? Those sorts of things. Am I making the calls, making the connections with other people that I need to make? People will start to drift away from that. We'll drift into more and more isolation, cutting ourselves off from the support. Is that happening? And then finally, am I relaxing my boundaries? And we talked about that earlier. Am I letting myself do things that I wasn't doing earlier on? So, again, this doesn't answer everyone's situation, but I think for a lot of people, if they find themselves struggling with maintaining sobriety, struggling with relapse, if you look at those three issues, you're probably going to find the solution and find out what you need to do. I want to end here with an invitation. This teaching is part of an ongoing program that I've put together called the Recovery Journey. The Recovery Journey is it's a combination of online support resources we give you, teaching materials, video teaching like this, and then phone support, phone coaching to help people engage in recovery from sexually addictive behavior. It is meant to be a supplement and to help people build the face-to-face support that they need, and is a great help along the way. You can join by just checking out the website, recoveryjourney.com. Just check that out. You'll find out lots of information about the program. Just go to recoveryjourney.com. Thanks a lot.